Yep.
Hello, everybody. Hope you're all ready for an
president-
exciting meeting.
The president's in the middle of my screen. I don't know how you did that, Colin. That worked out pretty well.
I literally just ran in the house and turned this on. So anything is haphazard at this point, Dick.
Your default setting worked out.
I got a
well
beer
for well.
though. I managed to hit the fridge. So
Excellent. Priorities.
Priorities.
Colin told me he was going to make a dartboard and put my picture on it. I'm not sure why, but is that true, Colin?
just spreading rumors. I like it from the start.
Yeah.
Dick, I do have the presentation pulled up for when the time comes to screen share for you, though.
Okay, and you're the master of ceremony, so I'm just going to let you start it whenever it's time.
All right. Well, everyone, welcome to the March meeting of the Flycasters. I will be your host. I am not the greatest Zoom host. Zach typically does it, so if I just bear with me if I stumble, and I'll just turn it over to Mark for opening remarks.
All right. Thanks, Colin. And yeah, thanks for being our Zoom guru tonight. I appreciate that. If I would have had to do it, we'd have been in big trouble. But anyways, just welcome to everybody. I know I'm Dick, looking forward very much to hearing what you have to say in your presentation tonight. Let's see. First, wanted to make a couple announcements. Oh, and let me back up just a second. Colin, did you have a chance to do anything with those poll questions? And if not, no biggie.
I did not, but I think you could. When I tried to do it, I don't think I can get the results you're looking for. So I think you should just pose them to the group.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I'll just ask a couple questions here and see if we can get a little chatter going back and forth. Of course, it's hard when you have 20, almost 30 people at one time, but just anybody out there, I just wanted to ask a couple of you, what is the most exotic fish that you caught last summer? If you could tell us what kind of fish and where, unless it's a secret spot, then that's okay. You don't have to tell us where.
Huh.
And my only exotic fish, I don't know if this counts, would be like a 4-inch bluegill, but hopefully somebody out here did a whole lot better than that. Or maybe somebody traveled somewhere. How about, let me pick on, Tony, do you have anything in the way of exotic species last year? Oops, I think you're still muted, Tony.
No, I didn't catch anything exotic. I didn't really catch that many trout, but I was really trying to think of trying to get out and do some crappie fishing somewhere here in town, and to use the fly rod with the crappie fishing. And I haven't done that yet, but I'm hoping in the future.
That is so much fun. I haven't done that in years either, but you get into a mess of crappie with a fly rod or a small jig, and wow, nonstop action.
Well, I like to do that because my wife says if you catch fish, you're supposed to bring them home to eat. and I don't feel bad if it's a bunch of crappie.
My mother-in-law used to always give me grief for letting all the fish go. So every once in a while I'd bring home a couple trout just for her freezer. Let's see, who else can I pick on? Who maybe did some traveling or maybe hiked into the backcountry in Wyoming or?
Tom Schultz here. It's maybe not exotic for most people, but for me it was a 14-inch grayling from up at Joe Wright. Not only was the first one I've ever caught, but I also saw those really clearly in the water. So I saw the iridescence off of their dorsal fin. That was really special.
Yeah, when the sunlight hits it just right, wow, it's almost like somebody plugged in into a socket and turned on a light bulb. Really, really nice. And we probably most of you know for the last, I think 3 or 4 years, then Dave Morse has hosted a chapter trip up there to Joe Wright at the end of June, I think. And yeah, usually the grayling are running and they're really, really fun to catch.
Yeah, first week in July is usually a little better.
Oh, you're there.
Yeah.
Dave. Oh yeah, okay. Didn't recognize you with your Mickey Mouse ears on.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right, let's see. One other quick question, and then we'll get going here. Oh, maybe just a show of hands. Oh, Jeannie, did you want to say something?
I need to announce the raffle winners if, when you
Oh,
finish.
okay. Do you want to go ahead and do that?
Sure.
Okay,
Okay, thank you. I'm sorry to interrupt, but
that's okay.
just want to get this over. Number 5 prize went to Art Campfield, and that's the Trout Tips book from Kirk Dieter, and the hat, and the canteen with the, I think this is a cutthroat on it, so an appropriate prize.
Nice.
And prize winner number 4 is Dave Beatty. He won snowshoeing frame and a snowshoeing routes book. Prize number 3 goes to Daniel Melfi, and he has a book to fish Rocky Mountain National Park. I'm sorry, I keep bending down to try and see what the prize are because I don't have the picture in front of me. Oh, these really nice coasters and a little display stand for them. So
All right, congrats to him.
to him. And I actually won.
Oh,
Yay.
Actually have it here for myself, so I don't have to give it away, which is funny, but I wanted something for ladies to bid on, but I guess I was the only one that spent $5 on it. So anyway, and our top prize goes to Tom Culbertson, and he wins the Redington ID fly fishing reel for a 5/6 weight. It's got line and tippet and everything, so it's ready to use. So congratulations to him, and I appreciate everybody's entries. We actually went past the goal, so that's always great. And I'm also supposed to announce that we, from our expo, in case people didn't know, we raised over $1,600 for the chapter, and that money will go to help with the Cameron Peak fire restoration, any projects that we have. We have a fencing project, I think, coming up, so maybe some of it will go to that, but all for restoration of our cold water fisheries. So thank you for everybody who entered the auction and the raffle. And I'm going to be training a new raffle manager, so I'm really excited to be able to work with, now I can't think of it, Ryan Laudermilk. And he's going to take the Secretary of State's test first, and then we'll get him going. So thank you for letting me be here tonight, and have a great meeting.
all right, thanks, Jeannie. Yeah, and congrats to the winners. And yeah, Ryan, thank you very much for raising your hand to help out. Sure appreciate that. And Jeannie, would you run that by me again? How much did we earn on this raffle?
Oh, I'm sorry. It was $538 the last time I looked. So
Oh, okay. Okay. All right. All right. Yeah. Thanks to everybody who bought a ticket there. Appreciate that. Okay. Let's see. Oh yeah. Just one more question here. And if we, I guess, just do a show of hands, maybe, who all caught a greenback this summer? Or at least
Yeah.
what we used to think was the greenback, even though it might not be the pure greenback. All right, I see quite a few hands there. How about, let's see, Dave Richardson, did you have to hike in to do that, or can I ask?
Yeah, up in Rocky Mountain National Park.
Nice. And,
yeah, it was a good trip.
Do you fish the streams or the lakes?
I was up at the lake.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, right below Emerald Lake, if that
Okay.
helps.
Let's see who else.
But I was gonna say I had my iPad on mute, but when you were talking about a cool catch or an exotic catch for 2020, last year I was out jigging for crappie with a 1/4 ounce jig and a big white curly tail grub on the ends, and I caught about 16 crappie, and all of a sudden my pool just bent, and I was like, I got like a largemouth bass or something on this.
Yeah.
And check this out. So it was a I'll see if I can get you to see it.
Oh, whoa! That's a bluegill, right?
Yeah, that's a 12-inch bluegill. It was 3/4 of an inch away from the state record.
Wow! Wow!
Wow.
Wow!
Yes. So I'm a Colorado native. My dad took us fishing all the time when we were kids, and we caught bluegill, 4 to 8 inches, and all my life. And this was 12 inches big. I mean, it was amazing. I submitted it to the CPW, and they gave me a Master Angler Award.
All right.
for a bluegill.
That's a trophy. That's a trophy, though. I tell you. Wow.
Yeah. I put him back. So hopefully this year I can try to go back and find him and beat the state record.
He was about the size of a dinner plate, I guess.
Oh, he was. Yeah, he would have been a dinner plate. Yeah.
Nice, fun.
But yeah, so I'm new to this, and I have so I do sculpture for a living, as you know, but I have a deadline that's kind of looming, so I'll probably bounce off here in about 10 minutes. But
Sure thing.
I figured I would just come in and say hi to everybody, and I'm new to the chapter, so look forward to meeting y'all at some point and being part of the organization.
Yeah, good. Thanks for joining us tonight. And for those of you that don't know, Dave donated a sculpture of a fly to our February Expo, and I think you donated some artwork also to the Colorado Trout Unlimited River Gala.
Yeah,
right. In earlier this month. So yeah, thank you, and yeah, welcome. Glad to have you.
Yeah, thanks, man. Looking forward to it.
All right, let's see. Let me get back on track here if I can find my my agenda. Just a couple more minutes here with a few announcements. Wanted to first talk quickly about our Rocky Mountain Flycasters annual fundraising program. Of course, part of that is the raffle, which a lot of you joined in this month. Well, and every month our raffles have been doing very well, which is great. But anyways, as far as our annual fundraising program, our fiscal year will start the 1st of April, and that's when we'll get the new program up and running. The first thing was just to announce that tonight to our chapter members. And then you'll also see an article in the Fly paper when that comes out in the April edition of the newsletter. And that'll have a lot more details and give you a lot more information than I will tonight. But along with that, we just want to remind we have over 1,000 members in our chapter, and just a good time to remind everybody, what is our mission. And in the coming year, we hope to put a high priority upon native trout recovery, and of course that means the greenback. That project started a few years ago, and we probably have another 10 or 12 years to go because they're talking about reintroducing that into the headwaters up by Long Draw Reservoir. And when the project is completed, there'll be over 40 miles of interconnected streams. That's the biggest project that Colorado has ever done as far as the native trout recovery. And of course, so that's the Poudre Headwaters Project. Big priority on helping out the government agencies with that, and the U.S. Forest Service. Also, any funding that we can get this coming year, and hopefully we'll get some grants. We'll also go towards restoration following the Cameron Peak fire. And I don't know how many of you driven up the Pooter, but pretty sobering to see all that black where it burned, right up to the road in a lot of locations. And the other area is communication outreach, and we have a relatively new communications committee, and basically we want that committee's job will be we want to tell everybody in northern Colorado, who we are, what we do, and the projects that we're working on, and we hope that'll lead to more membership and more
Next day, so then yesterday.
and more
I
volunteers.
Was.
Somebody's got an open mic. There we go. Thanks. Let's see. Another big part of our fundraising efforts, as you all know, was our February Fly Tying Expo. And this year we raised a little over $6,000, which I thought was fantastic, since it was a virtual expo. I don't know what our record is for that expo, but I know a few years ago, I think we raised $9,000 one night. And of course, it's so much more fun when you're there in person. You get to see all the gear and all the rods, and partake in the silent auction. But anyways, we did very well this year with the virtual expo. And again, those will go to our top priority projects. All right, with that, let's see. That is all I have as far as some opening comments. So I'd like to just quickly introduce Dick Jeffries. I don't think he needs any introduction. Dick has been, I don't know how many years you've been a member of Trout Unlimited, but also of our chapter. And at one time, Dick was the, correct me if I'm wrong, Dick, but you were the vice president for CTU, I believe. Yes. And so Dick has a wealth of experience, and now, of course, he's leading our conservation committee. And so he's our point person, working directly with the U.S. Forest Service, the National Park Service, et cetera. And so Dick, I think you're going to be kind of giving us an update on the Poudre Headwaters Project, and also the response to the Cameron Peak fire. So thank you for presenting tonight, and I'll turn the floor over to you, Dick.
Okay, thanks, Mark. Evening, everybody. Appreciate you having me in. Apparently, I was second team tonight, so just wanted to get that out there. Before I get started, too, I was looking in the chat box, and I think Mickey and Dave Beatty need to be recognized for their 16-inch suckers that they had listed as their exotic fish that they caught in 2020. So I will throw out the 31-inch walleye that I caught in Minnesota. That was pretty exotic to me, especially at 31 inches. So that was an extremely fun trip, and I came back with my arms literally exhausted from wrestling walleye and huge crappie around up there for 10 days. So what we're going to do tonight, we have a presentation on the Poudre Headwaters Project, and what we're going to do is we're effectively just going to play it for you tonight. This is available on the Rocky Mountain Flycasters YouTube channel, and if that's new information to any of you, well, great, because yes, Rocky Mountain Flycasters does have our own YouTube channel. I would love nothing more after tonight if you're interested in what's going on with the Poudre Headwaters Project, just start emailing all your friends, anybody, your business associates, everybody and anybody you know, and just send them the link to the video, and that's all you got to do. Nothing more than that. We'll have things more than that for you to do if you so choose, don't get me wrong, but we wanted to start getting the word out about this because the project is actively underway, and it's taken about 20 years to get it to this point. A couple of federal lawsuits, and the precarious road that you go through when you're going through federal lawsuits. So we're pretty excited that we can literally say that we are underway on that project. We started actually 2 years ago with infrastructure up there for the project. So we're going to play the video. I'll take some questions right after that, and then as soon as we wrap up on maybe questions about that, then what I've got is a short presentation on both the Cameron Peak fire and then a little bit of information on the East Troublesome. Not that the East Trouble, the part that jumped the divide. I still marvel at the fact that we had a wildfire jump the Continental Divide. That just is mind-boggling to me. we know that parts of it burned down into the west side of the, or into our side of the park, the east side of the park. But you know, the majority of our home waters, if you will, are impacted by the Cameron Peak fire. So we'll cover that, and then, like I say, a little bit on the East Troublesome fire. And then I'll be happy to take questions and let you kind of know steps moving forward and how we're trying to help address impacts actually to both of those fires. So Colin, I think if you're ready, fire up the Poudre Headwaters Project video.
Wonderful. I've got it ready here.
Hi, my name is Dick Jeffries. I'm the Conservation Chair of Rocky Mountain Flycasters, which is the no video, Colin. Unlimited. Trout Unlimited is a national nonprofit cold water conservation organization whose mission is to conserve, protect, and restore
Looks good to me.
trout and salmon fisheries and their watersheds. That mission is why we provide you this presentation. We would like to inform you of a Greenback Cutthroat Trout restoration project that, when complete, will be the largest interconnected restoration area in the entire state of Colorado. We are fortunate, and we should be proud, to know this historic project.
Can you make it louder?
In our own backyard. The project is located in the headwaters of the Pooter River Basin. For additional geographic reference, the Pooter River is a branch of the greater South Platte River Basin that drains most of northeast Colorado. Why do we want to restore Greenback Cutthroat Trout? As Americans migrated westward in the mid to late 1800s, the only trout those settlers would have found in the entire South Platte Basin would have been Greenback Cutthroat Trout. In part, as a result of mining operations and water diversions, the Greenback Cutthroat population, as well as most wild trout populations, began to decline. Even more unfortunate for our native fish was the early observation by settlers that the trout they were catching were not the same as the trout they caught back home. So they shipped trout from areas where they lived and placed them in streams throughout the West. Thus, the rainbow, brown, and brook trout, so common in our streams today, are all imported non-native trout. These non-native fish, and especially the brook trout, had a devastating effect on our native greenback cutthroat. Competition and predation of the greenback by these introduced non-native trout became so severe, we thought the greenback had become extinct. It wasn't until 1957 a small surviving population of greenbacks was found. In 1973, the greenback was listed on the endangered species list. Since then, ongoing efforts of wildlife managers and organizations such as Trout Unlimited have caused the greenback cutthroat status to change from endangered to threatened. In 1994, the greenback cutthroat trout became the official state fish of Colorado. Trout Unlimited is proud to collaborate with the U.S. Forest Service, U.S. National Park Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Colorado Parks and Wildlife, Colorado State University, and Water Storage and Supply in this historic restoration effort of our native trout. When complete, approximately 40 miles of interconnected streams and multiple lakes and rivers will provide a sustainable environment where greenback cutthroat trout can once again thrive as they did over a century ago. This sanctuary will allow us to enjoy a healthy native greenback fishery for generations to come. The U.S. Forest Service, as the lead agency in this project, has been working with several other federal and state agencies across multiple scientific disciplines to provide necessary research, analysis, and design. Working with these various agencies, Rocky Mountain Flycasters is providing annual volunteer labor groups for field work projects. Colorado State University has ongoing field research in the project area. In exchange for a 30-year access easement for their long draw reservoir operations, Water Supply and Storage deposited $1.25 million into a trust fund account to help pay for direct project costs. Colorado Trout Unlimited was appointed the trustee of this fund, thus providing for fund transparency and accountability. The $1.25 million represents a little over 50% of the total estimated expense of the project. So over the coming years, Rocky Mountain Flycasters will be working with others to raise the remaining $1 million. Using a wide scale, this map illustrates the general location of the Poudre Headwaters Project area. For reference, Long Draw Reservoir is about 35 air miles west of Fort Collins, or approximately 2.5 to 3 hours drive time from Fort Collins, depending on moose traffic. I don't know about you, but I find it hard to resist stopping for a few minutes to enjoy these wondrous animals. 40 stream miles of greenback cutthroat restoration could seem grand in scale. While the effort is indeed a project of historic size, when the restoration area is viewed in the context of a wider, multi-watershed view that shows all streams and rivers, we can see there is an abundance of other areas for anglers and outdoor enthusiasts to enjoy the many varieties of cold water fish that inhabit our northern Colorado streams. Zooming in on a tighter scale, this map shows more clearly the area of restoration work and the streams, reservoirs, and lakes that will become part of the recovery area. A few of the creeks and their associated watersheds included in the project area are Hague, Chapin, Willow, Poudre Pass, Neota, and Corral Creeks. Some of the lakes included in the project area are Hazeline and Mirror, Long Draw Reservoir, Pooter Lake, and of course the upper Cache-la-Poudre River are also in the project area. 2 new permanent barriers will prevent non-native trout species from accessing or escaping the restoration area. The upper barrier is located at the water storage and supplies flume on the Grand Ditch. The lower permanent barrier is located just below the confluence of Poudre Pass Creek and the Cache-la-Poudre River. A third permanent barrier is the existing dam at Long Draw Reservoir. Temporary barriers located throughout the project area will allow the scientists and restoration professionals the opportunity to develop the project in phases. Once the project is complete, the temporary barriers will be removed following leave no trace protocols and procedures. Any trout restoration project is a challenge. Add to the challenge, the Poudre Headwaters Project area includes lands managed by multiple agencies, 3 designated wilderness areas, and the wild and scenic designation of our beloved Pooter River. I am confident more than one gray hair has been born as the research and design professionals create structure and implementation procedures that comply with all requisite guidelines. Just a few examples of requirements of barriers in wilderness areas are: barriers must match natural scenic environment. Barriers must appear to be part of the natural landscape, and barriers must be constructed with the minimum tools to limit trammeling in wilderness areas. For some time now, efforts leading to this wonderful restoration opportunity have been underway. Years of scientific data has been collected regarding fish type, ages, and movement. Stream morphology analysis has been conducted to guide barrier design. Consultations have been initiated and in some cases continue regarding tribal, heritage, wilderness area, and wild and scenic river considerations. Design work for the upper and lower barriers is currently underway, and including installation will take another 2 to 3 years. As project phase areas are cordoned off, removal of non-native fish will begin. And once the phase is determined to be free of non-native fish, greenback reintroduction efforts will begin. Once all restoration work is complete, temporary barriers will be removed by following the leave no trace ethos. We anticipate each of the 5 phased areas of restoration will take 2 to 3 years to complete. That means the entire project will be ongoing for another 10 to 12 years. I know I speak for all agency partners and Trout Unlimited in sharing our excitement in bringing back the native greenback cutthroat trout to its home waters. This goal of creating a metapopulation of greenback cutthroat trout in the Poudre Headwaters is an important step in our journey to eventually see this historic native fish removed entirely from the endangered species list. The restoration area, spanning wilderness in the northern part of Rocky Mountain National Park and across a part of the Arapahoe-Roosevelt National Forest, will be highly protected. This highly protected environment will help create and sustain a truly world-class greenback cutthroat trout fishery. We believe it is vital everyone better understands some of the science embedded in this project, especially the scientific understanding of why non-native fish, specifically the brook trout that is currently predominant throughout the area, must be removed before the greenback is restored. To assist in that understanding, Rocky Mountain Flycasters has prepared a short video that addresses that subject specifically.
Hi, I'm Kurt Fausch from the Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Conservation Biology at Colorado State University. I'm a professor of fisheries biology, and I've worked on stream fish, specifically trout and salmon, in the West and throughout the world. So in Colorado, the native trout or cutthroat trout, and specifically in this part of Colorado, greenback cutthroat trout along Colorado's Front Range. The greenback, once thought to be extinct, is designated as a threatened species under the Endangered Species Act, and efforts have begun to restore a large population to the cache Poudre Headwaters, located near Long Draw Reservoir in Colorado. The biggest threat to the remaining populations we have of the greenback are non-native trout like brook trout, which were brought from the east in the late 1800s. Our research shows that cutthroat trout need larger streams with warmer temperatures that are free from brook trout if they're going to thrive in Colorado. PhD student Doug Peterson and I conducted a big field experiment and found that cutthroat trout fry survived 13 times better when brook trout were removed compared to control streams. And survival of yearling cutthroat was more than twice as high when the brook trout were removed. Surprisingly, however, adult cutthroat survival was the same whether brook trout were removed or not. So the experiment proved that brook trout could decimate cutthroat populations over time by competition and predation during their first 2 years of life. PhD students Amy Herrig and Mark Coleman found that when native cutthroat trout are isolated in high mountain streams above barriers that keep brook trout out, the fry can't grow enough to survive the first winter. Basically, they can't get large enough and lay down enough fat during the short growing season. Fisheries researchers and managers are working to identify streams with higher temperatures that can support greenback cutthroat survival and reproduction, and to establish barriers to keep brook trout out. This is why the Long Draw Project is so important. Cutthroat trout need larger streams with warmer temperatures that are free from brook trout if they're going to thrive in Colorado. The team of scientists and volunteers from a group of federal and state agencies and nonprofits and universities are following in the footsteps of my colleague Bob Benke, who pioneered cutthroat trout conservation. And they're working to create a stronghold for these fish above a barrier in the Big South Cache Pooter watershed. To learn more and to help restore Colorado's native trout, visit the Rocky Mountain Flycasters website.
If you visit our website at rmftu.org/conservation/native trout restoration, you can view and download a booklet that tells a little about why the eastern brook trout presents such a problem to greenback cutthroat trout restoration efforts. You can also view or download a trifold brochure that describes the Poudre Headwaters Project. This presentation is provided to inform you of the ongoing efforts regarding the Poudre Headwaters Project. Before I let you know of ways that you can assist in this remarkable effort, I would like to share with you the personal analogy I use when describing this project to others. During our historic westward expansion, we almost hunted the American bison to extinction. Some years ago, as a society, we recognized what we had done to the bison, and we set forth an effort to restore a small, protected population so future generations could enjoy this majestic creature. During that same westward expansion, we also set in motion a series of events that would take the Greenback Cutthroat Trout to near extinction. Did we hunt or fish them to that point? No. Did our methods of mineral extraction and our diversions to bring water to our farms, towns, and families have an impact on them? Yes. Was it us who introduced the eastern brook trout that were mostly responsible for almost hunting them to near extinction? Absolutely. So just like the American bison, we have now an opportunity to restore a small protected population so you and I, our kids, our grandkids, and future generations can marvel at these remarkable fish and realize why they have been recognized as the state fish of Colorado. If you find this project interesting and hopefully exciting, there are 3 ways that you can help. You can volunteer your time, you can make a charitable donation to help us meet our long-term financial budget needs, and you can share this information with your friends, families, business, and social networks. To engage in any of these suggested activities, please contact us on our website of www.rmftu.org or email me at conserve@RockyMountainFlycasters.org. That's conserve@ROCKYMTNFLYCASTERS.org. Or give us a shout on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Just post, "Hey, conservation guy, let's chat about Poudre Headwaters." And so there you have the Poudre Headwaters Project. I'd be happy to take questions from anybody that might have, history of the project, what's currently going on, what's happening in the future. The floor is open.
Dick, you might want to maybe just comment on what the fire has done, maybe to delay us doing some work, maybe this summer. Or maybe you had that planned for later. I don't know.
Yeah, actually, I'll cover that a little bit more in depth, Tony, when we get to the update on the Cameron Peak fire, because I've got mapping that overlays the Poudre Headwaters Project area on the burn severity map. And so that kind of helps let everybody know where it was impacted and where it wasn't. The good news I can share with you is we were fortunate that not a large portion of the Poudre Headwaters Project area was impacted heavily by the fire. So, thanks for small blessings, right?
Dick, is there not much concern about gene flow or hybridization with rainbow trout, or is that what the barriers are also there to protect?
Correct. The only, basically all fish in the project area will be eradicated. So we're not just removing brook trout. Basically, we'll eradicate all fish within the project area. And then, as it said in that presentation, we monitor that for upwards of 2 years. We go in there and do fish surveys and electroshocking and netting and everything that we can possibly do to ensure that basically we have, I hate to use the term dead streams, but effectively fishless streams. I'll describe it that way before we reintroduce the brook trout, or excuse me, the greenbacks. And then we hope nobody starts carrying bucket loads of brook trout back in.
Mhm.
Yeah. Hey, Dick, question. Where is that? Can you share with all of us where that lowest barrier is up on the Big South? Is that up about campground number 8 or so below Long Draw?
So I can best describe it coming from Long Draw down.
Okay.
If you're familiar with where the confluence of Corral Creek,
Yes.
and it comes in, and then right below that is where, so La Poudre Pass Creek continues. That's the stream that continues out of Long Draw, and then that meets up with the Pooter River. And then about a quarter of a mile downstream of that location, there is a natural rock waterfall. And
Yes.
that is the location of the lower barrier.
Okay.
And so we started in there 2 years ago, working with the Forest Service. We installed a sensor array across the waterfall. And then we did 2 seasons worth of tagging fish, so that we could start to determine what size of fish is able to make it up past the barrier. And then that data then will allow the designers to come up with essentially a solution of how that waterfall needs to be modified in order to prevent fish from making it up over that waterfall.
Okay.
Which is a challenge because that's in wilderness areas. So the modifications, we're going to be out there carefully drilling, and and we'll be like steel pinning and epoxy and rocks in, because we can't just mix up mortar and lay anything that looks unnatural. It all has to look like a natural waterfall when it's complete. We have, speaking of complexities, we have other barrier locations where we have to helicopter all the equipment in. So for temporary barriers, so in order to build the temporary barriers, use a lot of the natural material that's up there, which means a lot of rock and stone and whatnot that we can scarify and use on site to create even the temporary barriers. Those will actually be mortared in place. And so to effectively do that, we have to have batch plants for mortar, masonry cement on site. So we'll be ferrying all that equipment in by helicopter, setting up those essentially those batch plants, complete the project, and then all of it has to be ferried back out by helicopter. And then clean up the site. So there will be plenty of opportunities for volunteer work, I will put it that way, over the course of this project.
Dick, I had a question. Is there any other native fish that are going to be restored in addition to the greenback?
No, not in the project area. That will become just the whole purpose behind this is the U.S. Forest Service has been desirous for decades in creating a meta population of native greenback, and so that's what this is for. And part of that is we know that that's how we theorize that is how you create a sustainable population of native fish, is by creating this meta population, and you do that over a wide geographic area, so that when we have 200,000 acre wildfires that go roaring through, those fish are in a large enough landscape that they can move on their own to get away from impacts of fire and different things like that. And then as long as we can keep the native or non-native species out of the area, there's no reason to think that they won't thrive just like they did, over 100 years ago before the non-natives were introduced.
Okay, thank you.
In theory.
I have a quick question.
Yes.
Is the Pooter Pass Creek part of this, or is it just Cache La Pooter?
No, La Poudre Pass Creek is part of it. So La Poudre Pass Creek is fed by the flume that is owned by Water Supply and Storage from the Grand Ditch. And so, so basically the La Poudre Pass Creek is their transport vessel to move water from the Grand Ditch to Long Draw Reservoir.
Okay.
So as a matter of fact, this summer, the first, if you will, heavy equipment, what I'm going to describe, heavy equipment construction project that will take place on this project is on the upper La Poudre Pass Creek.
Okay.
Water supply and storage, they know that they need to replace their flume. It is still the original flume that was put in when the Grand Ditch was built.
Okay.
And so they have a need to replace it. And so we need that to be a permanent upper barrier, because the other thing that we have to be mindful of is we have to be able to prevent native greenbacks from making their way up into the Grand Ditch, because when the Grand Ditch is full of snow and during runoff, it can overtop, and that could potentially wash native greenbacks down into the Colorado River Valley and drop them into areas that are the Colorado River cutthroat habitat. I appreciate, I'm just saying this as a personal observation. I appreciate the Forest Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife, Park Service, everybody's due diligence in that. But as far as I know, nobody's ever thinking about trying to go in and do a native Colorado River cutthroat restoration project in the upper headwaters of the Colorado. So if you got a couple of 3 greenbacks that wash down in there, they're never going to survive anyway. It's been proven that that's not going to work. So, but that said, so as part of our project, what we'll be doing is we'll be working on creating the upper barrier at the water supply and storage flume, primarily because they will be shutting the water off out of the Grand Ditch to work on the flume. So the stream will be dry. We'll be able to get in with equipment and do the work that needs to be done. If we don't do it this summer, then what we would have to do is we would have to then design a dewatering system to move water around so that water supply and storage operations are not affected. So it makes sense that we jump on that this summer while they're working on their flume.
So how much of the creek will be dried up?
Well, during the time that the work is going on, water supply and storage will not release any water from the Grand Ditch.
Wow. So that whole stretch from the Colorado headwaters to Joe Wright will be dried up?
No. This is from the flume at the Grand Ditch down to the inlet of Long Draw.
Gotcha.
I assume Long Draw has enough water that they'll maintain flow down the river during this time?
Yeah, we always have to remember that these are irrigation supply reservoirs, right? So they are not going to do anything that has a negative impact on their ability to deliver water to their agricultural users, their shareholders. So yes, I fully expect that what they'll do is they will fill that reservoir to capacity so that they have release water available to deliver to the farmers that are part of their system while that work is going on upstream.
And one last question, is the idea to eventually get the greenback from the creek to Cache la Pooter?
I'm sorry, Dave, repeat that.
Is the idea then ultimately to get them from the Pooter Pass to Cache la Pooter?
Yeah, so when the project is completely done, all of the waters that feed into the Cache la Pooter basin above that lower barrier, all of those waters will be native greenback.
Okay.
So more than just La Poudre Pass Creek, it will involve the main stem of the Pooter and Pooter Lake. So all the way up into the park at Pooter Lake. You've got Hague Creek, Chapin, Corral Creek, all these little feeder creeks that come into that system that are above the lower barrier. So that entire area, that's the area that will become the native greenback fishery.
Okay.
Dick?
And we'll break it up it's like in 5 phases that we'll break it up into. We can't do the whole project at once. That's the reason for the temporary barriers.
Dick, someone asked about where the lower barrier was, and they cited site 8 on the Big South. if you look on the Pooter Wilderness site, it's actually, the barrier is located very close to site 20, which is kind of the highest site on the Poudre Wilderness Volunteers map. So it's very close to site 20.
Anybody else?
Why is the project, why does it take so long?
Well, you mean from now till completion, or from
Yeah,
when
yeah,
it
from
began?
start, well, yeah, the whole thing. Why, if everybody wants this, I mean, I'm kind of ignorant, I guess. Why does it take so long to get a project done if everybody wants this?
Sure. Okay, I'll try and be kind of brief about what's taken place over the last 15 or 20 years, whatever it's been. So this all came about. You have to remember, water supply and storage built the Grand Ditch, built Long Draw Reservoir, did all that work before there was ever a U.S. Forest Service, right? I mean, we're talking the late 1800s when that project started. So as it is the case in the West, irrigation companies, basically they, either they or cities or industries own all the water. So the Forest Service came into existence, and what ended up happening was water supply and storage. It was kind of a new process. I'm not pointing any fingers at them. They're a great irrigation company to work with. But they expanded the reservoir operation, and they did that without getting a Forest Service permit and permission to do so. So as that all came and reared its ugly head, basically the Forest Service went back to the irrigator and effectively said, okay, you did this, you didn't go through the right process and whatnot. We're not going to make you reclaim that. We're not going to make you lose your reservoir operations. But what you have done is you've impacted the fisheries. So we want you to pay, a mitigation cost of that. Well, what ended up happening was the first time around, the Forest Service got I'm offering you my own personal observation. This is not a TU observation, but the Forest Service got a little heavy-handed, I think, in how they were dealing with the irrigator. And so there was a lawsuit that came from that. Trout Unlimited actually entered as a co-venor in the first lawsuit on behalf of the irrigation company against the Forest Service. So the Forest Service, they kind of dropped the case. And so basically the irrigation company then just said, okay, cool, you dropped it, we're walking away. Well, so because the irrigation company had sued the Forest Service the first time saying, hey, you guys are kind of beating us over the head with a stick, and we agreed with that. Now the second time around, then the Forest Service then filed suit against the irrigation company and said, well, you can't just walk away from it. You still have a responsibility here. And so in the second lawsuit, we entered as a co-venor with the Forest Service against water supply and storage. And it was, I don't remember, I was actually president of the chapter. So, somewhere between what, 2012 and 15 or something like that, the federal district judge, I think it was a new judge that came in, he looked at his docket and he saw these two parties that had been involved in this long going thing. And I think he just sent the word out. He said, hey, everybody, you either figure out a settlement or I'm going to settle it for you. And I assure you, nobody's going to like it if I do it. So that kind of pushed the Forest Service and water supply and storage into a settlement. So that's where that trust fund came from. Okay. And so now what takes so long to do this is the area is so big, we have to break it up in phases. And so as I just said, it'll take an entire season, if not longer. Well, it'll take 2 years to do a barrier, because the first year is all the design and engineering for it. And then the second year is actual installation of it. So there's 2 years that have gone by. The third year, now you go in and you eradicate fish. And then you have to wait another 2 or 3 years to prove that there's no fish. So there's what, 6 years, whatever that's gone by. And then you monitor the fish population for a couple of years to make sure that they're holding stable. So each of those phases, even though you're rolling them consecutively or concurrently, I should say, they all have their own little timeline. So that's what spreads the whole project, the actual physical. Now we're getting it done out over a 10 to 12 year period.
Dick, this is Dave. In the presentation, it talks about this highly protected for the greenback population. And I just wondered if you could share some thoughts about how we as TU members talk to the public and talk to other fishermen about this, highly protected versus fishable and catch and release, and maybe about what the timelines are going to be. I assume during the next decade, it won't be very fishable. How do we approach this with the end goal in mind as we talk to the public and other fishermen?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that we need to keep in mind as current members of Trout Unlimited is that we are at the forefront of a legacy project, and legacy projects don't happen overnight. Legacy projects are never done for us as individuals. So that now I'm sitting here looking at Lindsay. Lindsay will reap the benefits of this legacy project. I will probably not be so fortunate to do that. So, you get these once in a lifetime opportunities where you have the ability to put together a project that is, it is a multi-generational project. We're preserving something for generations down the road. And I think that is the message that we want to get out to our community is, and not only that, it's our state fish. It's on the endangered species threatened list. And if we can do this project and get a few more greenback restoration projects done, I guess if you wanted to look at it from a cost standpoint, there's nothing that would help, wildlife managers reduce their operational cost than to have a species go off of the threatened list. It just cuts down their management cost. So I think there's those things that we can talk about in terms of importance. Yes, the fishery will be barren, but again, that's staggered out. So parts of it will be barren while we're repopulating during that time between eradication and when we get populations back in. It's protected because number one, it's the state fish. So any greenback that you catch, you have to release. That's just the law of the land. And also you have protections a little bit because parts of it are in national park and parts of it are in wilderness areas. So there are protections that come along with that. And then the other thing that really works towards our benefit is all of it is in the wild and scenic river designation. So there is even another layer of, if you will, regulatory protections that are provided to that headwaters area. At least on the main stem of the Pooter. Not a lot of those creep up into the feeder streams, but at least that portion of the Pooter is all part of the wild and scenic designation.
Dick, in the project area, are there regulations against taking the brook trout at this point?
Right now, all regulations are, whatever the fishing regulations are for the state normal is what they are. Mm-hmm. As we move into the eradication phase, the eradication stage in these different phased areas, we're having, pretty long conversations with the Forest Service and the Park Service. We would like to see them create salvage areas so that fishermen can have the opportunity to go in there and harvest as many fish as they want, preferably not catch and release, but literally harvest as many fish as possible, just to kind of get the numbers down, before we move in with chemical treatments. But right now it's all still just under normal fishing regulation.
Mm-hmm.
What do you mean by chemical treatments?
That's the only way that we can completely eradicate the fish. So that's the standard process for when you are doing any kind of fish reintroduction. So I'm gonna assume there's probably a 95% chance they'll use rotenone as the chemical that they will use. And they do that as a slow drip over a given length of stream. And then at the bottom of that, they have a neutralizing agent. Rotenone is a natural pesticide. And all the water quality managers and everybody that have to deal with those types of things, they're completely fine with that because it has such a short, the chemical itself breaks down very quickly, so it's not very long acting. So it's at least been shown to be a very safe method for fish eradication.
Do you have a timetable for long draw eradication?
I think if I remember right, Dave, I believe long draw is in phase 3. So probably 4 or 5 years. That's my guess. I have not heard the actual, date from the Forest Service, but knowing it's phase 3, I bet we're 4 or 5, maybe even 6 years down the road.
Sounds like we'll have a couple of TU trips up there then.
I would think that'd be a great idea.
It's great fishing.
Yeah.
Hey, Dave, are there any similarities between the restoration efforts in the south along Bear Creek? Any similarities as far as environment, water concerns, flow concerns, climate change that this project is facing?
Not really, Paul. That was one of the reasons, Dr. Fausch was, pretty, I guess, pointed about that one of the reasons for picking this area was these, fisheries biologists have been looking for an area that, for the most part, is assured of a very, sustainable water supply at the right temperature range for the fish. I think I feel pretty confident that the research has been done that kind of makes this particular area the right place to do it for the greenback.
Okay.
The question about Bear Creek is a good one. If we're talking about Bear Creek, where the remnant population of greenback cutthroat trout were discovered, there's research, if you want to read into it, that would explain how that all occurred. But they're in the Arkansas River watershed, and they were introduced there sometime late in the 19th century. Thank goodness we have a remnant population that we can use to populate the rest of the streams in northern Colorado, their historic range. So it's an interesting story, but I think it's a good news story.
Oh, Dick, you might point out that Zimmerman Lake is the brood lake for this genetic population today with the
Correct.
state, and that the hatchery down in LaPorte, is it, are where they're continuing to raise greenback trout.
Actually, it's Leadville, Dave.
Oh, okay. I thought they were doing it here.
No, because of whirling disease. The hatcheries on the Pooter River are not eligible for greenback, greenbacks for, taking them up to release age, just because of whirling disease. Because the greenback is not a whirling resistant strain of fish, so that's why they're reared over in Leadville.
That's at the National Fish Hatchery there, right?
Yes.
Great.
Well, again, I'll point out, Dick, you're correct. The Leadville National Fish Hatchery has a great effort to raise up Bear Creek strain greenback cutthroat trout. The Salida Fish Hatchery, which is not a national U.S. Fish and Wildlife Hatchery, but is a Colorado Parks and Wildlife Hatchery, is instrumental in raising the fish. And the brood stock at Zimmerman Lake are very important, and they were not affected by the fire. Boyd Wright, our CPW fish biologist on that region, can tell you that. But as I think we've been told when we visited the Bellevue hatchery, not the Watson Lake hatchery, the Bellevue hatchery, if I remember Dave Morse, they told us they were raising greenbacks there because that is a well water fed hatchery, not Pooter River water. Is that what you're remembering, Dave?
Yeah, but that could have been changed. I don't know.
Well, the source of their water is a well there. And the challenge is they have to reintroduce oxygen into the well water. But if I remember the last time I visited with the day camp, they were raising greenbacks, I believe, but I could be mistaken. The main efforts, as Dick said, are at the Leadville National Fish Hatchery and the Salida Hatchery, which is a Colorado Parks and Wildlife Hatchery.
Yeah, the greenbacks that we released into Roaring Creek last summer came out of Leadville.
Okay.
Because I know that the drivers were telling me that they left Leadville at 3 o'clock in the morning so they could be on site in time to start offloading fish.
Dick,
okay, anything?
Do you have any further insight into the survival of the fish at Roaring Creek?
No, nothing that anybody can hang their hat on. We still have struggled to get in and actually do any site work. And now with another, anywhere from 40 to 48 inches of snow, it's probably going to be longer. But the fisheries biologists are, they're kind of in that 90%, if you will, certain range that we probably lost the vast majority of that population. They don't expect there to be a very high survival rate, like single digit percentage rate. So what, maybe 70 or fewer out of the 700 some that were released. Okay, anybody want to go on to some big fire news? I mean, it's been a long time since we've had that. That's almost old news now. All right, thank you much for listening to that. And again, if you actually go to the YouTube channel, I don't know how the audio quality was for everybody while you were listening. Mine wasn't very good. When you listen to it on the YouTube channel, it is considerably better than that. So I don't want to have anybody kind of not follow up on that. So yeah, if you think that's interesting, get that out to your networks. I would greatly, you would greatly appreciate that if you would do that.
Real
Colin,
quick.
am I able to share?
Yeah, you're the co-host, and I also put the link in the chat to that, so folks can take a look at that. But you should be able to screen share, Dick.
All right, here we go. All right, should everybody see a big map surrounded with green?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, all right, here we go. Okay, Cameron Peak Fire, we probably all remember well, started on August 13th, basically 25 miles east of Walden and about 15 miles southwest of Red Feather Lakes. Cause of the fire still remains under investigation. The fire was fully contained on December 2nd, and it was declared fully controlled on January 12th. So, August through January, one of the, not only the biggest wildfire in the history of the state, but one of the longest burning. And as of today, there still are hot spots that continue to burn and will continue. If we get another 4 feet of snow, that might be enough to put it out, but we could even have some hot spots that I'm not saying they'll flare up next spring, but I'm sure it wouldn't surprise me people see smoke next spring. So the final reported burn area is just at under 209,000 acres. So as I said, now the largest recorded wildfire in Colorado history. Of this total burn area, and that's what you kind of see, throughout this whole area here, and with all the multicolors, of that 209,000 acres, about 36% of it burned at these levels here in red of either high burn or moderate burn. While we're looking at the map, so here's Long Draw Reservoir, okay? And so that lower barrier is right about where the tip of my cursor is. And so you've got this one run up here of Hague Creek in Rocky Mountain National Park that really got hammered. That is all, you know, moderate to severe burn up in there for the most part. That is about the only major drainage that was impacted by the fire that is in this entire, I mean, if you look here, you don't even see Pooter Lake. You know, it's, you know, clear up in here. So we've got this big area, you know, that just kind of comes around in this area that is this restoration area. And we were fortunate that the only thing that got really any heavy impact was on Hague. There's a little bit over here on the other side coming up Corral Creek, but even at that, Corral Creek kind of snakes right up along the edge of this burn area here. So there'll be some minor impacts on Corral Creek, but overall, as far as the fire is concerned, for the Poudre Headwaters Project, we got very lucky. So what I wanted to point out here on these burn severity maps that are put out by the Forest Service, this is all part of their BEAR assessment, burn area emergency response work that they do. What they're talking about in burn, they're not talking about organic growth. They're not talking about how many of the trees and how much of the grass burned. That is not what this is all about. I can't make it big enough for you to read it, but if you actually look at it, it says soil burn severity. So what they're talking about, basically, when you see red, that means that soil is now sterile, right? So you go all the way from green, where there was very low or, you know, unharmed, up to sterile, and then these two gradients in between. So when you get all this yellow and red in here, you have got some major problems on reforestation and natural regrowth, because that fire burned at such a hot temperature that it effectively sterilized the soil. Not so much in the yellow, but in the reds, that's almost a guarantee that those areas are going to be, I mean, we're talking decades and decades. A lot of you probably remember the Bobcat fire on the Front Range below Estes Park. You drive up in there now, and yeah, it's all grass covered and whatnot, but still there is very little in the way of trees that are coming back from that. And that's what we're going to experience up in here. Is over time we'll see some soil regeneration. We'll see grasses start to come back. Trees, that's a completely different story. It's going to be, you know, I'll never see trees growing again in some of those areas in my lifetime. I know that for a fact. The other thing now, then, what happens with all this when you lose that organic covering on the ground? This is where things really start to get kind of dicey, because what you do is you start to open up areas for increased sediment transport. All that organic growth, whether it's grasses, shrubs, whatever on the ground, and all the duff and dander and, you know, limbs laying around, all of that stuff really holds that soil in place. So we go through our natural rainstorms and runoff and whatnot, and the soil, you know, basically, you know, while all soil moves and eventually makes it to the river, but it is at a very normalized rate. So I think the thing that, and I highlighted this one column here. So this chart talks about expected increased sediment delivery, and this is on a 5-year mapping. So you start looking at these drainages. Bennett Creek, 2,200% above normal. 2,500% above normal on East Sheep Creek. 1,800% on Mineral Springs. I mean, you just start to go down here. Whoops. Sorry about that. Bear Gulch, Buckhorn, almost 8,000% post-fire sediment load increase. Forest Service Road 344B, 8,400%. So what we're talking about is we are talking about tremendous, and I mean absolutely tremendous quantities of sediment that are going to start coming down these drainages, and they all end up in the Pooter River. That's just the way it's going to work. So it was great to see that 4 feet of snow up there. What I'm hoping for is it gets really cold, because the last thing we need now with that 4 feet of snow is temperatures to shoot up into the 60s and 70s and cause a quick runoff, because that is going to be that's going to be a monster sediment transport event if something like that were to happen. It's going to be bad enough, during normal, just with runoff. But yeah, so we've got some dramatic impacts from this fire. I didn't want to start the program out by saying there's not a whole lot of good news I'm going to share with you tonight. I thought I would wait until I was on the second slide to tell you all that. But that's kind of the truth. So, in Trout Unlimited, we're kind of like, well, what does all the soil burn severity, all this sediment transport and everything mean then to fish? Okay. So I want to point out something here, because you notice on this chart, it only talks about cutthroat trout habitat, right? So this is done by the U.S. Forest Service. And what we have to remember is that the U.S. Forest Service, as a fishery manager, I hate to describe it this way, but they're basically only responsible for native fish. All the other fish are a recreational asset, and that's why they get stocked into streams and that type of thing. So what they're really working with, more or less, is they're working with native fish. So in our waters, then they're only focusing on impacts to cutthroat trout habitat. Well, as anglers and people who go up and recreate in those areas, we know if there's cutthroat, there's all kinds of fish. So you can extrapolate that to mean that this is going to have an impact on all those fish. So basically what we're doing here is we're looking at all of these then water areas and how they've been impacted. So again, what you're looking for is how many of them are hit with all this yellow and red, which is this overlay of this burn severity. And so, we can tell right now that, the big ones are, the Sheep Creek, Williams Gulch to a certain extent. Here's East Fork of Sheep Creek. Here's the lower Roaring River. And again, Sheep Creek. Here's Poudre Headwaters Project area at Long Draw Reservoir. So very little impact there. East Fork of the Roaring River, that's where the greenbacks were stocked. So again, you're looking at, I'm guessing what, 30 to 40% of that stream is hit by either moderate or severe burn. Corral Creek, if you'll remember, I mentioned, was kind of on that southwestern tip of the fire, so it wasn't impacted hugely up in the Poudre Headwaters area. And then Black Hollow just got shelled. You look at this now, and again, now you're looking at probably what, 60% roughly of that stream is either in severe or moderate. So you can look at these and these particular streams, and right away you can start to see where we're going to start having all these sediment transport problems. And I keep referring back to sediment transport problems because they're the genesis of all other problems. Okay.
Dick, do you think that the runoff might clear out Hague Creek population of brook trout? Can it do the job for us?
Probably not. It depends. If we get a normal runoff, if we had years of even average runoff, this restoration thing is going to take a long time. Many of you remember the High Park fire, lower in elevation, so that if there's anything helpful about a fire for post-fire restoration, it was at a lower elevation. We thought we were in for, just terrible things. But then if you remember in 2013, that was followed by, what was it, a 1,000-year flood event? And basically that rain that came down flushed the entire system out, flushed almost all that fire, out of the river. And so by 2014, the Pooter was running probably cleaner than it had in, I don't know, a century. because, you know, we had this huge fire that was followed by a 1,000-year flood event. Well, the chances of that happening, you know, twice are probably not good. We might get little areas that, you know, but this is so big and so widespread. I think these impacts are with us for quite some time. So again, now we start, you know, they go back and they start looking at these areas. You know, again, this is all about cutthroat trout. So we start looking at the ones that were the highest. And if you remember, that was, again, Black Hollow and East Fork of Roaring. And so now they were able to go in and start doing assessments and know exactly, you know, how what assets in there are going to be compromised and how they're going to be affected. And so a lot of this is so that we can start looking at, you know, what is there that we can do, if anything, to go back in and start trying to mitigate any of this stuff. And you know, that's a story in its own, because the cost for reforestation is phenomenal. The most effective treatment that you can do in short term is mulching, wood mulch. Well, that sounds great, but all you got to do is, you know, drive up in the mountains and look across miles and miles of burned, thousands of acres of burned forests. And it's like, how in the world do you mulch all of that at anywhere near an amount of money that somebody's going to come up with? You know, you're talking literally, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars to do the entire burn area. And that's probably not going to happen.
Dick, could I interject?
Yep.
Your presentation is wonderful. I would encourage people who want to volunteer to get out on the landscape, because we've had volunteers at Black Hollow and up the East Fork of Roaring Creek. And the only way you'll really get an understanding of the landscape is if you get out on the landscape, volunteer, and it's not going to be pretty, but keep volunteering, get out there, because when you're on the landscape, you will you know, get knowledge of the landscape and what all of these words mean. So I would encourage everyone to look forward to the next field season, get out there, and we'll try to get you into volunteer opportunities, because that's how we really learn and get a commitment to the landscape. Thank you, Dick.
Yeah, you bet, Phil. And I'm going to circle back to that at the end too, about some opportunities that will be upcoming. So I just real quickly, I want to jump over on the other side. So this is the East Troublesome Fire. Okay. And so up here is where you can see the spot that jumped the divide. This is what started heading down towards Estes. So the divide's basically right through here. So basically all this is happening, you know, kind of northwest of Lake Granby and in this area. So again, you know, you look at these, you're looking for these red and yellow areas throughout here to get a kind of a sense of just how damaging the fire was. So here you can start to see it based on drainage. So Willow Creek, if you look down here at the legend, again, what you're looking for is you're kind of looking for the red and that really kind of, I guess, what, peach color, if we want to call it that. So Willow Creek, you know, here you've got moderate, and then you've got this section of high here. Here you have moderate. Here you've got this little on the Colorado River, you got a little bit of moderate here. And then over on North Inlet, you've got some moderate burn over here. So you would look at that and you would say, oh, well, okay, that doesn't look as bad as the Cameron Peak fire, because I'm not seeing where it looks like 30% is both, you know, 36% is both high and moderate. But as far as acreage that impacts watersheds, and, you know, we're talking about now watersheds, we're talking about our drinking water, if you know, to put that, because you got to remember Fort Collins drinking water comes from two places. It comes from the Pooter River and it comes from Northern Water as part of the Big Thompson transfer project. So that water over in Grand Lake, you know, Granby, Shadow Mountain, that water is stored there to send over to us, both for drinking domestic water as well as agricultural consumption. So here's some really interesting numbers that start to boggle the imagination a little bit. That Colorado, I'm going to go back to this Colorado River drainage. See how much of this is in blue outside of burn area, right? So you got this little bit of a wedge here. 30% was all of that drainage that was in that. But now look at the impact of that. When you look at the Colorado River burned area, it's only 30 square miles, okay? Potential 5-year sediment load is 446 acre feet of sediment being transported off of that burn area. So down here in the Shadow Mountain Delta, they estimate that'll be a 29-foot high pile of sediment in Shadow Mountain. I mean, I'm sorry, but that's mind-boggling, right? So if we go back and look at Willow Creek, so here's Willow Creek. So again, just a tiny sliver of it. And then you got, you know, you do have now a fairly large area, 80,000 acres, and, you know, a little over 40% burned in moderate. So you start to say, well, what does that sediment transport do? So where Willow Creek comes into the system, this is crazy to me. You know, I'm in construction, so this is crazy to me. Over 3 million cubic yards of sediment transported out of the Willow Creek drainage, right? So for anybody that's not familiar, that's 300,000 dump trucks. The average dump truck hauls 10 yards of material. So, you know, just start picturing that in your mind. 300,000 dump trucks backed up to your house, ready to start dumping. That is a gigantic, big pile of material. Do all of you remember I-25 down past, I believe it's Johnson's Corner? As they did the rework on Highway 34 after the 2013 flood, all of that material, that the rock and everything they took out of there, they ground up and they hauled out to the interstate, and they made that huge pile on the west side of the interstate. Some of you kind of remember that. I mean, it was a gigantic pile. That was less than 1 million yards. Right? So a pile 3 times that size is what's expected to come into the Colorado River system over the next 5 years. So these are the numbers that we start to, you know, kind of look at, and it just gets mind-boggling because that can't help but have an impact on fish. So over on the west side, there's 4 native trout populations in the upper headwaters. The Colorado, they think that the Colorado River Cutthroat in the Trail Creek area have probably been lost. And the Colorado Cutthroat on North Inlet and Colorado River drainages, they yet can't assess. They can't get in because of snow. You know, so we're continuing to do more assessments over there, or, you know, not that we're directly involved in it, but there's a lot of conversations going back and forth, as you can imagine, cross divide. And so, you know, as people, you might think about going over and starting to fish as thaw starts to hit and into the summer. I wouldn't be surprised that you run into some temporary closures over there as you know, scientists and agency personnel are trying to get in and do more complete assessments over there. And that's the end of that for just the slide presentation. So what's going to happen in the big picture, as far as what people can do in terms of volunteering? There will be, and it will be very short notice. I assure you, it will be extremely short notice. But there will be some volunteer opportunities that come up this spring. And the reason for that is that we have some areas that need to be addressed as quickly as we can possibly get in. So we call those exigent response actions. And And so there might be bank stabilization projects. There might be, installing wattles, or might be, who knows, but there will be these limited opportunities to get in and try and do some things immediately before runoff. Okay. And so we're working very closely. Ted and I were both at a watershed meeting today. And Ted, what's the average attendance? Probably 60 or 70 different people at those meetings, it seems like. You never know, but it's an alphabet. Yeah, it's an alphabet soup of agencies and organizations that are all working together and trying to make this a coordinated effort. We're being as proactive as we can. We just signed a letter, Greeley Water, all the city of Greeley, city of Fort Collins, and Northern Water just sent a letter yesterday to Governor Polis's office. If y'all remember last week, the CARES Act was signed into law by President Biden, and embedded in the CARES Act is actually infrastructure funds. And so that we're asking the governor to consider taking those infrastructure funds, or at least a portion of them, and using those to address post-fire recovery in some of these burned watershed areas. And so we signed on to that letter yesterday. We have a huge amount of efforts that are going on behind the scenes, trying to get projects put together, and post-fire restoration efforts put together. But in all honesty, this year is going to be the year of analysis and design. So other than those exigent projects that may come up at spur of the moment before runoff, we're probably going to see the vast majority of post-fire efforts for where we need volunteers happening during the 2022 field season, is when that will kick off in earnest. And then as far as the Poudre Headwaters Project, we will have some stuff going on up there. And again, right now, after getting hit with all that snow, if you kind of go back and remember over the last couple of years, the Poudre Headwaters Project activities typically came up in August, September, October. That long draw area is a late season area to get in the first place. And so we'll have some opportunities to get volunteers in there to do some stuff. But they do have to kind of finish a little bit of more of their burn assessment, as the Forest Service is kind of jockeying around phases now to kind of do a workaround, if you will, around some of the burn areas. And then, of course, as we start to, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it, I hope I don't jinx it, re-normalize from our COVID-19 world. We'll have more and more opportunities become available where, we have COVID-19 volunteer protocols. We have a fencing project comes up in April and May with Parks and Wildlife on the Lone Pine unit or Lone Pine Creek in the Cherokee Park State Wilderness area. And we'll be able to follow, it's a fencing project, we'll be able to follow COVID-19 protocols. So that announcement will come out this week on the website. So the best way, as you're starting to look towards wanting to do volunteer work, if you are not registered on the Rocky Mountain Flycasters volunteer portal, it's called I Volunteer. Make sure and go there, at your earliest convenience, and just get signed up, because that is where those announcements are going to be, coming out directly to that volunteer network. And it's a really easy sign up. You don't have to sign up for anything particular. You just sign up as a general volunteer. And what effectively it does is it puts you on the volunteer distribution list, so that as these projects become available, you'll get notified of them right away. So with that, any last questions for me about anything? All right, well, I ran you late, so I appreciate everybody's patience and your time.
Thank you so much.
Good job.
Yeah, thanks, Dick.
Thanks, Dick.
Thank you, Dick. All right, well, with that, yeah, tons of information there. Dick, I'm glad you can keep it all straight because I know I can't. Thanks again for a good presentation. All right, let's see. Yeah, we're about 8:30. So, oh, and I just wanted to say, Dick, in addition to yourself, you've got a lot of people on your committee doing a lot of work, going to various meetings, and please pass my thanks on to them also. Really, really appreciated. Thanks to everybody for being here tonight. My goal, you know, through our chapter membership meetings is to let our chapter members know what's going on so they can be part of the team and look forward to doing some great things in the future. And I always like to say in closing that our members who get involved are the engine that makes this chapter run. So thank you very much for everything that all of you do, for your support, you know, whether it's volunteering or financial or the, you know, $10 to the raffle. Thanks for your support. So with that, I'll say good night. If there's anything else anybody wants to hang around for, or any other questions, feel free to do so for a few minutes, but we'll go ahead and adjourn. Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you. Good night.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Colin. Appreciate you hosting. Thanks again, Dick.
Yep.
Thank you, Dick.
You bet.
Dick, are you still there?
I am.
Did you get my email
Which one?
about the materials?
Oh, I did. Yeah, I'm going to do my best to get that ginned up and get that notice out tomorrow.
Okay.
My best may not be very good though. I got a little busy with the job that's actually paying my bills.
Oh, what? You got to work?
Yeah, I got one of those really kind of, you know, just like, you know, nuisance jobs.
Well, my nuisance this week, the last couple of days, is trying to get my driveway clean with snow. So I missed a lot of stuff and came in late and looked at stuff. And I guess I'm not as young as I thought I was, because I got pretty sore after shoveling 20 inches of snow off my driveway.
That was some heavy stuff too, wasn't it? Really heavy and wet.
It was an inch of ice and slush on the bottom.
Yeah. Hey, one last comment. I got to compliment Dennis Cook on his attire tonight. Did you guys notice the hat and tie?
Oh, look at that.
Do you have a green beer there also, Dennis?
I'd have to answer you in the past tense on that.
Yeah.
Nice one, Dennis.
Yeah.
Yeah. Had to have a little fun just to liven up the COVID atmosphere around here, you know?
Right. Yeah. All right. Good job.
No beer, only Jameson.
That's my nightcap.
Yeah. Cough medicine.
I'm going to McDonald's tomorrow and get a green peppermint shake. That's what I'm going to go for.
Oh, stomach ache.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to sign off, everybody. Thanks and good night.
All right.
Yeah,
Good night.
good night, everybody.
Easy, fellas.
Okay. Bye.